Drew, how would you summarize how this off-season minicamp process went for you guys?
Good. I think we took a lot of strides coming together as a team, continuing to improve on a lot of the fundamentals. I think that's what we really focused on in the offseason. You're not going against an opponent, so you really have a chance to hone in on the finer details of your position and your job and really try to improve individually and then put it together collectively there towards the end of the offseason. So I thought it was good.
When we last talked to you, you said Marvin was going to define his role over the next couple months. How much of that has been accomplished just in the OTAs, rookie minicamp, mandatory?
Yeah, certainly some of it. I think you saw the talent, you saw the effort, you saw the ability. I think a lot of that's going to, when it gets competitive, when the pads come on, you're going against other people. It's hard to do a ton of that in the offseason, but I think was really pleased with the way he performed throughout the offseason program.
All those strides, and when you look back to last year at this time, after everything's new coming in, Kyler can't practice and all those things, what's your feeling going towards training camp now compared to this moment last year?
I think, as you said, like you've done it once, so you feel a little bit more prepared. You learn from a couple of the mistakes maybe you made or didn't make the first time around, and just tried to iron some of those things out. And then certainly having Kyler out there helped. So you're using real reps rather than, hey, what are you thinking about this? Have you seen that on tape? What do you feel? I think that certainly helps when it's not those conversations. It's what did you see? How did that feel? Did you like that route? Did you like that combination? Are you seeing it the way we want to? Where do we need to change things? Are you happy with where the system's at? Because it's a collective effort, and certainly those reps are important.
Did you see enough from Marvin here in the last couple of months to start to figure out, okay, this is how he's going to fit into the offense, here's how it's going to evolve because of him, those kind of things that you talked about maybe after he was drafted?
That's a good question. Certainly. Yeah, I think you started to see kind of how he fits into the big picture, how he's going to define that role. I think that's going to continue through training camp. I certainly don't. And really for these guys, and we kind of tell that at every position, that's never done. Like you're always defining and redefining your role in this league. You want a bigger role? Earn it. You want less of a role? You're going to show us, and not that they want to do that, but I think that's an important part of being a good team is keeping that competition and keeping that reality that no role is set in stone.
Can you give us some insight into your general philosophy of how you work this array of weapons that you have into the offense? Is it based on matchups? Who's hot? What are the things that go into deciding on a week-to-week basis?
Probably the two things you just said are the biggest two. We have to go out and attack and beat a defense. So what they're allowing us to attack, whether that be scheme-wise, personnel-wise, situationally, those are things that we're going to look at. And then it's a combination of us versus them and certainly us. You need to get your best players the ball. Your best players typically are going to define who they are based on it when their number gets called, how they make plays. It's a little easier in the run game because you just hand it to the guy. In the passing game, there's coverages, there's route running, there's timing, there's pass protection. So sometimes you're calling a play for a guy and the ball goes somewhere else. And that's a way that a lot of guys sometimes define their roles in this league is, hey, we didn't design everything for you and you walked out of the game with 8 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. Wow, maybe we need to define a bigger role for you. Or we kept calling your number and it should have gone to you and you weren't winning, you weren't making the play. All right, maybe we need to reevaluate how we run the offense through you or through somebody else. And that can be coaching, that can be the player, that can be a whole number of things. But I think ultimately it comes down to the two things you talked about. It's production, and then it's who we're going against and what they present for us.
Did you see from the newcomers to the receiver room in Zay and Chris Moore?
I think guys that instantly integrated themselves into the offense and into the team. I think they're pros. They've been around this league a long time. They understand the game. They understand what it takes to be a pro and to play at a high level. So I was really pleased with kind of how quickly they jumped in, learned the system, were able to go out there and execute the offense, but also just how they interacted with their teammates, how they went out and had fun, enjoyed playing. I think that's a really important part of the offseason. You got to come together. You got to enjoy what you do. And I think those two guys love football. That's one of the reasons they're here.
What kind of growth have you seen out of Kyler in the last year now?
I think he's the type of guy that gets better every day. And sometimes it's physically, sometimes it's mentally, sometimes it's a leadership perspective. But when you take the job and the sport as seriously as he does, I think you're always going to see that growth. I think it's something that he's always looking to be a better player, be a better teammate, be a better leader. So the more opportunities he gets to do it, the more he learns from it, just like we do as coaches. I think you saw that throughout the spring.
How much do you think it opens up opportunities for the offense? You mentioned, as you just asked about Moore and Jones, but also the differing skill sets of even Marvin and Michael and Greg and all the different things you can do with them, plus Trey McBride and whoever else. How exciting is that to look at all these different things and what it creates for the offense?
Absolutely. We're going to petition the league for 2 footballs at all times so we can get but no, I think you said it. I think it's a variety of skill sets. It's guys that do different things well, so it allows us to be multiple and allows us to attack a defense in different ways, because you never know exactly week to week where the weakness is or what you're going to need to exploit. And if you have everybody doing one thing really well and that's not the matchup that week, it's hard to adjust. So I think that's certainly going to be part of who we are. It's certainly part of who we always want to be in all facets.
You need 2 footballs to keep everyone happy? Does that kind of mean?
No, I think as we look to build the roster, I think this ultimately comes from the top, from Monty and JG. The focus is always going to be on winning, and that's never going to change. And if that's your number one goal, that at the end of the day, if we're winning, we're doing the things to put ourselves in position to win, guys are going to be happy they're here and happy they're contributing. You know, certainly great players want the ball. You want them to want the ball. I've been around some guys that always wanted the ball because not because they're selfish necessarily, but they felt like it was the best way to win, you know? So you want those players. You want those guys on your roster. And I've always said, I said this to Kyler, actually, I was joking, you know, because sometimes the quarterback can feel that pressure. Oh, I got to get this guy the ball. That's not your job. That's my job. You know, as a coach, we can dictate some of that. We'll try to. Your job's to play the play. Whatever the look is, go where the ball needs to go, make the decision that needs to be made. Don't worry about that stuff. And I think based on the character of the guys that we've kind of talked about in this room, I don't really worry about that.
Do you feel like the offensive line has improved enough this year to allow you to do those kind of things you want to do?
Yeah, honestly, I felt like we were there last year. Towards the end of the year, I thought they made some great strides in terms of execution, communication. We tweaked some things as coaches in terms of how we want to do things to help them be better. You know, I think that's an ongoing performance. But yeah, no, I really like where they're at. And, you know, certainly it's hard to evaluate at times in the spring by nature of the rules. But I think training camp's going to be a big part where we need to take another step always as we kind of get towards the season.
How would you describe the identity of your offense going into year 2?
It's a great question. I don't see it changing drastically. We need to be tough, physical, smart, explosive. You know, those are probably words that you're going to hear me say over and over and over again if we're going to be good. We need to create big plays. The mindset always one more point, whatever that looks like. It can be a ton of points. It can be few points. It has to be more than they scored. And I say that almost to a point of being like lame about it, but it's true. Like it is what it is. Like that's the game. Like we have to score more than them. That's all we're trying to do. That's all we're ever going to try to do. And to do that, typically, it's protect the football, create explosive plays, and execute situational football.
It appears that there's been a lot of depth added throughout the offense at all the different groups. How do you evaluate overall how that looks going into camp?
I think that speaks to the competition that's going to show up when we put the pads on and go play here in August. You know, the deeper the roster appears, the bigger competition there is for those roles, for the football, you know, for those roles that have an impact on the offense. So I'm really excited to see those guys get out there and go compete because it ultimately makes them all better, which is what we're trying to do every day.
You talk about progress across the board. Is there a position group or particular players where you've seen more growth than expected? What group has improved the most over the beginning since the last season?
Yeah, it's a really hard question. I don't know if I could say like, hey, it's definitely this group or definitely that group because the roster changes, the situation changes. So I think there's so many things that go into that, and you kind of like we don't almost evaluate it that way. It's like each position, each individual, we try to lay out very definitive. Like, all right, here's what we're going to get better at. Here's where we need to stay the same. Did we get there? How much did we get there? Sometimes it's hard to tell until you go out there and compete. If that makes sense. But no, I think across the board, just the way the guys came in this spring and worked. I think they really bought into what we're doing and how we're doing it. So it was a really good offseason.
What have you learned about Trey McBride working with him, the different ways that he can help your offense, not just catching the ball, but
Yeah, I think that, to your point, his willingness to do whatever the job requires. The tight end position in this offense is multifaceted. You're not going to just split out and catch the ball. You're not just going to sit in line and block. It's not going to be just the run game, the pass game, whatever it might be. We put a lot on that position, both mentally and physically, and I think he's done a really good job of embracing that and wanting to be really good at it. You know, certainly you see his skill set in the passing game. That's always what fantasy football owners love. That's what gets you on Sports Center and those type of things. But I think at the end of the day, that position in this offense to be successful requires a lot more than that. And his willingness, without question, to do some of the dirty work that's not going to get noticed, that's not going to put him in the headlines, has been really impressive.
having said that, is there another level in the pass catching part of his game that he can take to?
I think so. I think at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell you any single person on our roster has reached their ceiling. And I don't feel like I'm ever going to feel like that as a coach. I don't want them to ever feel like that as players. There's always going to be areas where, hey, we need to improve. We can get better. This is how we're going to get there. I think if you lose that drive, you stop getting better or maintaining your ability. So I certainly feel like he has another level that he can take his game to, and we're going to push him to try to get him there.
Drew, how's Tip doing so far?
Good, really good. Yeah, I think, and Trey's been a great mentor to him, because he's a great role model in terms of how it's supposed to be done, how being a pro. And I think so Tip came in right away and kind of took to that, listened to that, was willing to watch that, and then go out and try to execute it at his ability level. So been really pleased with kind of how he did that over the course of the spring.
Going off the tight end position, what more would you like to see from Elijah going into year number 2 at that role?
I think continued growth. Like, we laid out a play, whether it's pass game or run game, there's always going to be areas, right? Hey, we need to be more precise in our route running, or hey, we need to be better as a combination in the wide zone game, whatever it might be. And here's a couple examples of when it wasn't where we needed to be. Here's a couple examples of probably when it was. Can we be more consistent? I think that's probably going to be the biggest piece for him and a lot of the younger guys is, okay, you did some things really well, but we need it that way all the time. Can we show that level of consistency?
What are some of the challenges going from the wide receiver role to a tight end role at the highest level possible?
Yeah, there's a number of them. I mean, certainly the run game is the most obvious just because it's so different. But I think even in the passing game, who's covering you, the nature of how you're getting off the line of scrimmage, the area of the field that you're playing in is very different. So I think there's some time and effort that goes into adjusting to that.
Has Kyler ever been that guy in your time with him that wants to put it all on his shoulders a lot of times because he's got the ability? Or have you found that he's really struck that balance between, feeding the ball and getting the ball to other people as the game goes?
I think it's a mix. I think any great player, especially of his talent level, is always going to want the game on their back. And to some extent, they should, and I should, right? Like, he's that type of player. But I think he's found a really nice balance of when to make his plays, but also when to let the talent around him provide. And I think he did a nice job there towards the end of the season of knowing when to mix back and forth from that balance to allow us to be successful.
What about your teaching style, maybe the play calling? Like Kyler, relates to you and calls you a genius,
I fooled him. No, I think that's just it's getting to that connection. One of the things I've always told him is if we're ever going to get to really where we want to be, when I call something, you know exactly why. And to the point where you're almost anticipating the call before I do it. And I think that's really important for the quarterback position, probably more than any other position, right? At the end of the day, the 10 other positions, it's plays called, I need to go execute the play. For the quarterback, there's a little bit of a higher level thinking there. I think that's what makes the sport and the position so unique. And I think we've gotten closer to that point of, are we ever going to be there perfectly? I don't know. But I think that relationship and that understanding is really important. Like, I would say the same thing about him. I think he sees the field really well. I think he understands the game really well, to the point where I think a lot of times he does know why I called something. Or, in the moment, if I have those where I'm like, God, that wasn't the greatest call for that moment, he might be like, what were you thinking there, dude? And I'm like, believe me, that was not what I wanted. It just was the first thing that came out of my mouth with 40 seconds on the play clock. So I think, or vice versa, I might call the play and be like, dude, check it down, like the situation. He's like, I wasn't thinking, so those moments happen. I think that connection and that relationship has been really fun to build and continue to build here moving forward.
Is that relationship, I know you were joking about you fooled them, but that relationship, as you refer to guys buying in, how much has that grown, certainly in these 18 months, not only with Kyler, but a lot of guys on the offense too, with trusting you and you trusting them?
Yeah, and as you said, I think it goes both ways. Like, I want everybody in that room to have full belief in me to put them in a position to succeed and win games, period. Does that mean that everyone's always going to feel that way all the time? No, probably not. I mean, I can't even get my wife and my daughter to agree with me on a regular basis, right? But I think at the end of the day, those guys know that I have I'm here to help them win and help them be great football players and nothing else. And I want them to feel that every single day we're in the meeting room, every single day we're on the field. And I think the more we're around each other, the more they're starting to see that and believe that, which is awesome. And then, as you said, I want to trust them. I want to know when I call your number that you're going to do it the right way, go make the play, do it, whatever the job is that we're doing asked to do to help us win. And I think we have a good blend of that, and certainly we're going to continue to develop that through the training camp and into the season.
And along those lines, with all the assistants too, how's that relationship, not only with you, with them, but the players too, with all the different assistants on the offense?
It's big. With the staff, those are guys, honestly, I probably spend more time with them during the season than I do anybody. So that relationship, that bond, that understanding of, like, look, at times I'm going to tell them things they don't agree with or want to hear. And they may have an opinion for me that I might not agree with. You have to have those conversations and discussions during the course of an NFL season if we're going to be successful. But to have those productively, you got to have guys that understand that we have each other's back, we're in it together, and we're all moving in the same direction.
Kevin Stefanski was talking about play calling recently. He said the biggest challenge and also what he loved the most was the collaboration with his staff early in game weeks in the construction of game plan. What do you love about that process? Do you agree with Kevin too?
Absolutely. And certainly he has. I mean, Kevin probably influenced my understanding of the game and my ability to do this job maybe more than anybody. I have a ton. I love the guy. But I think he did hit on it. That's what makes it fun, because we all kind of look at it from a slightly different angle. We all, realistically, going into a game week, we have slightly different jobs, right? Somebody's getting the tight end ready, somebody's getting the quarterback ready, somebody's getting the offensive line ready. I'm trying to get the entire system ready for that week. So we all bring different things to the table that we think is going to allow us to be successful, to try to put a plan together to go win a game. And you have a very finite amount of time to do that. So I think it's a really enjoyable part of the job that makes it fun to do.
How fun is it when, I'm sure there's times when you want to do a certain game plan, but sometimes you just feel you're not maybe capable of because of who you have. But when you have a lot of those pieces, that must even add to that enjoyment.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier when the players, I'm a much better play caller when the players are really good. That's never going to change. But no, you do feel that when you have a number of weapons, it's all right. They can't take it all away. Unless they're elite, and then it's going to be a tough game, and you got to go out there and grind it out. But it allows you to be multiple, it allows you to be hard to defend, and it makes it fun early in the week because you almost have too much that you want to put in. You got to pare it down to say, all right, here's how we're going to go into the game.
What have you learned about a guy like Trey Petzing?
I think, again, at that position, similar to the O-line, like, he can't get tackled. So I think you saw what you saw on college tape in terms of the athletic ability, his willingness, and his love of the game. But at the end of the day, I'm really excited to see him in pads and see him get going here in August.
But is there any positional battles that you're excited to see unfold as we get into training camp?
No, all of them. Yeah, and I obviously that's an easy answer, but I think it's true. I think that's what makes training camp and the off-season program kind of fun. You're going to be surprised. We always are. There's going to be a guy that takes a stride that maybe you didn't see coming, where you're like, 2-3 weeks into camp, you're like, wow, guy's playing at a really high level, really excited about him. You guys will feel it. It'll happen in a preseason game where you're going to ask 10 questions out about a guy you haven't talked to me about in 2 years. Because he's going to show up and play at a really high level, and I think that's what makes so much of this sport so entertaining.
Are you noticing any of those surprises right now, or through the offseason?
It's so hard without pads on, and it's an easy answer, but we're not playing the game. Like, we're almost not playing the game. We're working on the skill. So I certainly am excited to see some guys go out there and compete that have done some good things in NFL games and see if they can take it to the next level. But to say I know they're going to do that, I need to see it.
How have you seen the chemistry between Yelda and Kyler kind of develop from year 1 to year 2 with the other guys?
I think it's almost like my development with Kyler as well, because you just get to finally do it, and you're finally out there together, and I think those conversations become more real. So it's not like, hey, did you see it on tape? Can we rewind it? Can we pause it? No, we both saw it in real time. Let's talk about it. All right, did you want to do this? Could we do that? Are we on the same page? That center to quarterback relationship is really important because a lot of times, especially in protection, they're working together, hand in hand. They both sat through the meetings, through the protection meetings, gone through the game plan, and hit the field together. So having that, almost silent communication becomes very important.
Drew, now that you've been in this a little bit, how different is this than what you thought it was going to be?
I'm a seasoned vet now. I'm practically not a ton. I think I've been very fortunate to have some really good role models, like Kevin Stefanski, like a lot of the guys that I was fortunate enough to work with early in my career that put and invested into me the opportunity to be in this position and kind of prep me for it so that it didn't catch me off guard or there weren't a ton of things that I wasn't prepared for. Certainly there's always things the first time you do it, you're like, okay, that was maybe a little different. But I think the big things and kind of the core principles I felt really good about going into it, and I don't think that's changed.
Have you seen from Clayton at quarterback, and then also what Desmond brings to the table? And I guess that's a heck of a competitive situation too.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that'll be great going into camp. I was really pleased with just kind of the way Clayton came back. It looked like, guys, you got to step away from it after the season. But especially at that position, you can't just turn it off and then show up in the offseason and expect to take a major stride. And I think he did a lot of work on his own, just physically, mentally preparing for the offseason, learning the offense, learning the game. Because I think there's a big difference really almost in defensive football in terms of what you see in college and what you see in the NFL. And I think from a quarterback's perspective, that's decision-making, that's protections, that's going to change a lot of what you do. So I thought he took some great strides this offseason. Certainly need that to continue when it's live, when he can get hit. And, Desmond was a great addition. I thought, I have full faith in Monty, but I thought that was always love to bring in players that are going to go on the roster and compete for spots. And he's played at a high level. I mean, probably right around 500 as a starting quarterback in the National Football League. I think he started, 3 seasons in the NFL. So that experience is valuable. He's played a lot of football. He's run the offense. He's been the guy, and he brings kind of a unique perspective to that room that I really appreciate.
What level of offensive balance do you feel like you have at this point?
In terms of,
The receivers, running game, everything that you can do on offense.
yeah, I think it's funny. Like a lot of people say the word balance, like we need to be 50-50, which I've always thought that was like, that's not the goal of balance. The balance is being whatever I need to be when I need to be it. That could be 80-20, that could be 90-10, or it could be 50-50. But I think certainly, and we were able to do it pretty well towards the end of last season, we could move in and out of what we needed to be based on the situation, based on the opponent. We're going to see here, going into this season, if we can maintain that and hopefully do it at a higher level.
Trey said that he's never seen Kyler more confident, more motivated, and also told us that the offense is just a tight-knit group. What can that do for your offense? Where can it take you?
I think it's an important part of playing the sport. It's not an easy game. Physically, mentally, it's draining. So to do it with guys you care about, with guys you love, makes it a lot more enjoyable. And I think at the end of the day, you're just going to work a little bit harder when you have that type of relationship. So I do think that matters. I think certainly those guys have put some effort and time into building that. That doesn't mean that everybody in the building loves each other. Like, that's not humanly possible, I don't think, with that many people. But I think it's an understanding of we're all trying to accomplish the same thing and we're willing to put in the effort to get it done right. So that I'm really pleased with where that's at.
Jonathan seems to emphasize scoring a lot as much as, we talk about production and guys putting up numbers, but getting in the end zone, making plays in the red zone. How do you actually instill that mentality? Because, of course, like everybody wants to score, but how do you kind of instill that in the coaching level?
I think it speaks to the earlier question. At the end of the day, it's about winning. And the only stat, like I've always joked with guys, like, talk about turnovers, explosives, yards, all this, like the only stat that's undefeated in the National Football League is points. Like no one has ever scored more points than the opponent and lost. It's never happened. So it's like I joke about that, but that's the nature of the game. Like you can get blown out in every other category, but if you score more points, they give you the game. That's always going to be the case. So I think that attitude has to be, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be emphasized in practice. And then when you talk about roles, there are guys that show up in the red zone that they call it pay dirt for a reason. If you can find it, you're going to get paid. So I think you got to find the guys that when the field shrinks can show up and make plays in small areas and contested areas, whether it's in the run game, whether it's in the pass game, whatever your personnel and the opponent dictates. But it's a big part of the game.